You know what? This is the opposite of urbanized. We're gonna go over to this shed because that feels more urban. All right, this is sufficiently urban. School circle here.
Can't we go into the building?
Yeah. It's hot out here. Complain, complain.
You know, someone's gonna make
All
a
right, guys.
classroom now.
Okay. So now that we're in, make sure that you're close enough to hear me here. I've got my Shack Tech volume boosted, so, and I'm a loud person to begin with. Now everybody is going to all tab out, and Zoomwork going to send them the Scribbler link.
All right. Make sure you don't click on the. How can I?
Just as a reminder, everybody, if you don't see images, just refresh the page.
What page are we on?
Yeah. Also, unfortunately, I forgot to set the setting. Now everybody's a moderator, so make sure you don't press the page forward button or anything, because it'll be for everyone. Or draw without. Shit. We, as you might know, this course was originally intended to be lectured by Mr. Jackson, but he had a personal incident here and had to go, so we had less than an hour here to prepare everything, and it's very ad hoc and improvised, but especially Aquafish excels at improvising, so I hope we can provide you an adequate experience despite the conditions. Is anybody not in yet?
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Alright, so welcome again to the MOUT course. Select scaling on the right top for the best viewing experience. For the purpose of this course, derping is actually not allowed, nor should it be in any other official UO business. And if you gentlemen have a question, just use the raise hand functions on the left top, which you don't have because you're a moderator. But we'll figure it out. Just say your name right in the chat and we'll know it. Alright. Structure of this course. So the course is obviously on MOUT, Military Operations on Urban Terrain, is what the acronym stands for. So in the preliminary part of this course, we're going to briefly go over what is military operations in urban terrain, what are its characteristics, the scope of this course, and the importance of MOUT. Then we'll look at reconnaissance and planning of urban operations. We'll look at movement. So something is shifted here, great. We'll look at the movement within and through urban terrain, what tactics can be used, what tactics are applicable in Arma. We'll talk about the command and control aspect, what is key in communicating and commanding in the urban environment, and we'll then specifically look at the leadership skills, the troop leading procedures that are involved, and the conclusion of our course will feature a field training exercise with the aid of our friends from Tiger Team. Any questions so far?
Alright.
Right, then we'll take us further and step into the first part here, introduction. So I'm just going to go over the definition here quick, and then I'll hand it over to Aquafish again. So what is MOUT? How is it defined? The U.S. defines it as all military actions that are planned and conducted on basically terrain where man-made construction is the dominant feature. So any type of predominantly built-up areas, the British like to call it FIBWA, fighting in built-up areas, or operations in built-up areas, I think it is. It's kind of straightforward there. So especially the combat in cities, as it calls here, the house-to-house and street-by-street fighting in towns and cities is the core of the business when we talk about MOUT. Why is it important? It's important because urban areas and cities are generally important. So cities can be considered centers of gravity. In any armed conflict, cities have been and will be centers of gravity. That is where the majority of the population lives. That's where the key infrastructure is, where the key economical infrastructure is located normally. And cities themselves, especially today, are conflict generators. They're sources of conflict in especially asymmetric warfare of today. In insurgency, we're looking at highly operations highly focused on the urban areas, and the control of these urban areas is going to be decisive. So that is why MOUT is important, and especially important for if we look at our scope in UO. Cities are typically our objectives. Cities are typically where we at least have to move through, or to seize, or to control. So MOUT is almost in any mission so far I encountered, we have some degree of operations in urban terrain. So MOUT kind of important. What are characteristics of urban terrain? Might all sound common sense, but it's kind of important to go over it in your mentally in order to make further. Yes. So when we look at urban terrain, we're looking at a high density of man-made terrain. So we're looking at terrain that is completely different from the natural terrain we typically encounter, that is homogeneous normally and is predictable. Urban terrain can be very versatile, very dense, and very unforeseeable in its nature unless you're familiar with the actual area. So there's a lot of complex factors to consider. It also has multiple levels on the vertical level, which you typically don't have in natural terrain. When we are on an open field, there's only one terrain level really, unless the enemy was able to dig tunnels under it or build some kind of subterranean features. And in an urban area, we have sometimes dozens of stories and buildings which are all relevant to our battle space. And last but not least, obviously, urban terrain features a multitude of avenues of approach. Typically, if you're in a highly built-up area, there's a lot of streets from which the enemy can come from, a lot of avenues of approach he can use, and you most likely, without any further, intel assets, reconnaissance asset, will not notice his approach until the last moment, while in an open field, or let's say in an open desert with 30 clicks of visibility, you will see the enemy approach at a way earlier point in time. So let's move on further to introduction. What are the categories of urban terrain? Also kind of straightforward. That can reach from anything starting at villages, small built-up structures, as we typically find them in Chernarus or on Schwemlitz or on Seli, even on Pakistan. All these maps typically feature at least small villages. The more larger urban terrain complex that we find are strip areas that are typically built along roads connecting towns, industrial complexes built along these routes, larger military bases, something like that. You'll find this on a lot of maps as well. So will you find towns such as Seli on Seli 2, and last but not least, we're looking at large metropolitan areas, large cities like Fallujah, where UJO is basically very dense urban terrain. And obviously, the degree of urbanization, the higher the degree of urbanization, the more complex the operation becomes. So, assuming there's no questions on these parts, it's kind of... Aqua, do you want to already take over here? Or?
Yeah, I can start. All right. So, urban terrain is interesting, different. And the requirements for recon and understanding the features of the terrain analysis are all different as well. While you may use the same basic toolkit, oftentimes getting recon inside of cities is going to be in a significantly different manner, although again, small groups in good vantage points will be there. It is vital to understand what cities look like, especially if you have more rundown cities. It is, in Arma this isn't a huge concern, but in real life you have, and I just did something, I think. Okay, I guess we're back
that was
there.
me, I thought the...
Oh, well, what I was saying is that it's not quite as much in Arma, but in real life, it's very difficult sometimes to find maps that are correct to understand exactly what you are actually going to look at. And so these kind of leaders recon, these kind of leaders, the kind of recon, the kind of looking that you need to do over the area is going to change. And I'm struggling a little bit with the recon here for one reason. This course is not really trying to focus on the actual mechanics of reconnoitering specific areas. You kind of have to pull that from other courses, from other bits to understand. Really, we're going to try and focus a little bit more on how to deal with the terrain analysis and the planning that you get after you have reconnoitered your terrain. So it is an absolutely vital part of MOUT because of your need to understand where you are going, how you are going to get there, where are strong points, what buildings can be easily defended. Like if there, and I know this doesn't really apply in Arma again, but it's still a very important concept. Is it a concrete schoolhouse or is it a shack, a shitty little wooden house? Those kind of differences make the difference between a weak point that could be easily assaulted and a strong point that could possibly hold back an entire company, depending on the vantage points, depending on that. So a very key part of your recon is going to be the actually understanding what the terrain looks like and where you will want to put your troops, doing the actual analysis of the terrain to understand where you want to put your troops there. If we could head back to the MOUT thing. I know you're trying to do some work.
Quickly make a note, I was trying to move the screen across and I drew a line.
Say again?
I don't really know how I did it, but I was trying to move the screen across and I drew a line on the page.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
It's gonna happen. Try to be careful here when we're doing this. Anyways, applying MOUT to not only the terrain, but your reconnaissance efforts is going to be very important. Understand as we go through this, understanding your objective, and that's something that I will touch on again and again here. Understanding the objective that you have in this town. Do I have to seize a point? Do I have to clear a section of the town? Is there some sort of other objective that I have to complete, whether it's defusing something, whether it's moving a convoy through, whether it's securing a small compound and then leaving? Any of those things radically alter the routes of approach you're going to use, B, strong points and vantage points that you are going to use, and C, your overall attitude towards the terrain. For example, if you are getting aggressive, if you have to, say, breach and clear a warehouse inside a town that is hostile, that is going to be you just have to breach, clear that warehouse, and then retreat back out. That is going to be a very different attitude. That is going to be a very different speed of movement from, say, an overall clearing of a town like, say, Selly or, Electro. So understanding what the purpose of your mission is vital there. The enemy is another part that I'll touch on again and again, but understanding your enemy when you're doing your terrain analysis is extremely important, especially when you're in the city. I find that it's very important normally. Understand what your enemy may do, but especially in the cities where you may not be able to see or may not be able to directly view your enemy's defensive preparations, or you may have to actually go off of early recon, or just photo recon that is old, that is outdated. You may not be able to see roadblocks or strong points or anything, but you will be able to look at the area, the terrain, and say, how would I defend this? Where would I put things? Where would if I was defending this area, what would I do what would I do to actually defend this area? Where would I put my troops? Understanding what your enemy wants to do here. And that is not just as simple as, oh, they want to deny me what I want. Sometimes, and especially in real life, not as much in Arma again, the enemy has completely different objectives and interests to you. If we take other examples from real life, there may be, although actually I can't think of one that fits exactly what I'm trying to say right now, but I'll kind of make one up. A local militant group might be more focused on defeating their ideological or religious opponents than they are on denying your movement inside terrain controlled by them. They're still dangerous, they will still oppose you, but they're not going to give up their entire command structure just to or every foot soldier that they have just to protect one point, when their overall goal is not your destruction or stopping you from getting somewhere, but to actually destroy an enemy faction. So understanding your enemy, what he wants to do, how he wants to defend a place, is vital to understanding this kind of thing. All of these operations get more complex because you have larger groups of people, larger chances for the emergence of independent forces and non-governmental forces, that kind of thing. It all exists in MOUT. It's a very complex concept. So, knowing your troops, what advantages do you have that will allow you to succeed here? Do you have lots of grenades? Do you have lots of rifle grenades? Do you have weapons with like a 7.62 round, which are hard to maneuver? Do you have submachine guns that you're going to be able to jump through? Do you have shotguns? Do you have breaching equipment? So specialized breaching equipment, breaching charges, flashbangs, crowbars, rams. All of these things play into what your plan will be. If you run your men up, or do you have highly trained men? If you run your men up to a house where and enemies know you're coming, are you going to be able, using your equipment and men, to slam or to breach the door, kill everybody in the house, even though the enemies know you're coming? Do you need that operation of surprise? Or are the enemies lackluster, poorly trained guerrillas, and you are a SWAT team? That kind of concept. Know how capable your troops are going to be to understand where they can strong point, where they can fight, how they can clear out the enemy, what they are going to need for their sustainment. Know the terrain. Again, we can go over this and over this and over this again, but this is one of the key points. Being able to look either physically in game or overall on the map and see, ideally you do it both, and see what the terrain looks like and where are the key points. Being able to look at a map or look at just a view from an observation post and understand where the key types of terrain, what the key buildings are. And try, when you're doing this sort of analysis, we're not going to go over the whole Okokoke thing or any of the other significant terrain analysis tools. That's, like a whole class in itself. But the focus is that you're going to look out there. You're going to have to at least make guesses. You may not be an architect or an engineer, but you're going to have to make guesses on how strong is that building. I know in Arma that doesn't really apply, but anyways, how strong is that building? How many levels does it have? Are the windows going to allow me to shoot at a good angle, or are they just going to be holes for bullets to come through? Am I going to have to breach and clear them, or are they already unoccupied? Am I able to drive the enemy out before I arrive so that I do not have to breach and clear them? That kind of thing. Time. Very important, but again, it only applies in specific missions. Do we have to run through this quickly and make a hasty attack, or can I keep it slow? This plays into knowing what your mission is. Can I keep it slow? Can I just hold down entire avenues for hours, letting the enemy exhaust themselves in counterattacks while I stay in safe positions before I have to move forward again? Can I call in airstrikes? Can I just wait around? That kind of concept. Do I have enough time? And civilians, it doesn't exist much in Arma, although many times you'll have co-TVTs or other things like that. It's not that much played, but it is, the largest consideration really for at least most combat that has transpired here. It may not have been the largest consideration at Stalingrad, but it's certainly one of the largest considerations in Fallujah. Do you know what the civilians' attitude will be? Do you know how many there are? Do you know when they will be around? What is their objective? What is our overall ROE? All of that is an important part of understanding where we are going here. Okay, so we are going to be looking at, I wish I could really do this more in-game. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to set up an activity here with understanding the differences in urban terrain. I think that it's something that a lot of you can kind of see, can kind of get a feel for. We'll cover it more in the FTX, definitely. But I mean, obviously people know how, people have a basis for knowing how to deal with, these buildings. We've all seen these kind of buildings. We've all fought in the cities before. We've all run around who's shooting in Cherno, etc. We've all dealt with that before, and we've all seen how some buildings dominate the skyline and can dominate. We can spend an entire time dealing with the one building. One building can take hours and hours to jump into. It all depends, and it all depends, and it is I'm sorry, I was dealing with something else over there for a second. Getting into understanding where the buildings are and what you can expect, differentiating between what a strip on the outside of, say, Zargabad looks like and what the center streets in Fallujah look like. Some of them look very similar. You have a number of large buildings along a fairly wide avenue, not much in the way of residential structures, not much in the way of micro-terrain areas. And those kind of areas are where you have, say, a 7.62 by 51 machine gun can lock down an entire block. Just because there's very little places to hide, and unless the enemy pushes hard in a specific attempt to dislodge your forces, you can kind of lock down an avenue as you push forward on other areas. That kind of strong pointing and then moving under that or attempting to flank forms a lot of the basis of how many modern militaries fight. Well, pretty much everybody fights in urban terrain. Okay, so one of the big things, and I'll go over, I'm kind of hitting on this again, understanding where the strong points, the access routes, and the vantage points. So understand where your men are going to be holding and fighting from, understanding how your men are going to get there, and understanding how you are going to observe enemy forces. That's the three bits there that you are going to use to plan, to first of all analyze the terrain, so understand, okay, where can I get, where can I go, and then plan the mission. How am I going to get there using the points that I have identified in my terrain analysis? And again, in smaller Arma games, you're going to have a micro focus. We will, as I said before, spend an hour trying to clear a warehouse, spend an hour trying to go through one small village, and at that point, one shed 10 meters from the side of a building can suddenly be the focus of an entire infantry platoon trying to put a couple of guys out there. That kind of keep your eyes up, but a lot of times it's not incorrect to allow MOUT operations, especially at the squad level, MOUT operations to devolve into these very small runs and spurts and jumps. Understand your timeline, but if it takes a while for you to spring a man to go to the other side of a building to allow him to suppress down and move the rest of your squad, it takes a while. There's a great saying, you need to learn how to be slow in a hurry. Do things well, that is, make sure that you are crossing all your T's essentially, that you are doing everything correctly, that you are not skipping over things, that you are not moving completely without checking all of the options. But you need to do all of those things. You need to make sure that everything is correct. You need to make sure that you're dealing with the right thing, but you need to do that as quickly as possible. Be efficient when you're trying to assess the situation and order your men forward. We'll cover more of that in the leadership bit here. I'd like to open it up for some questions right now about terrain analysis. We'll get into planning in a sec. Any sort of questions whatsoever, really?
Raven,
Yeah.
what is micro-terrain?
Well, that's sort of an expression in other things, but really it means if you're saying, okay, well, I have a whole street. The street is the terrain, one residential street. A shed, a strong wall, that kind of thing is a micro-terrain. It's a very small part of the overall building. It's used in games and game design a lot. It's not quite so much used in the real world. But your little fence with a concrete block at the bottom that can protect a man from being shot suddenly becomes vitally important when there's a hail of bullets coming down there. Anybody else? All right, I think we're going to push more towards the planning operation here. Let me see if I can find what I was looking for as far as documents.
That flow diagram with the...
Yeah.
Yeah, I can just throw it up there, just cut in.
Okay, so this looks complex, and it is. I'll give you a second to kind of look over this, and we'll try and explain some of this. It'll be quick. I won't spend forever on this. There's only maybe 10 minutes, but it's a little complex, and it doesn't actually apply specifically to MOUT. This is more for actually breaching, but the planning stages and the execution stages are very similar to actually breaching, or very similar to most MOUT operations, and a tremendous number of MOUT operations actually are breaching. So you are trying to push through some sort of blocking force that the enemy has put up, and in order to achieve action on your objective. So the main thrust that this is trying to impress upon you is that you plan in the opposite way that you execute. So when you execute, you might, and I'm just going to kind of summarize what each of these kind of stages are. So determine size and composition of support. Essentially, that beginning one is get your men, get them sorted out, figure out how many you have, what kind of weapons, all that kind of stuff. Figure out what they are, get everybody together, move them out to the FUP, comms check, that kind of concept. That's the bottom here. So that's your beginning. Then the next, you decide, okay, first squad and second squad, you're going to be pushing forward, and you're going to be taking a javelin from weapons team. Then you are deciding where you are going to do these things. So, okay, I want to blow up the left side of that roadblock. I want to hit that one farm. I want to hit it with 40mm grenades a bunch of times over on the right. So figure out where you're going to start the breach, where you are going to push through and hard. Then you are going to determine, you're going to say, okay, where's the enemy? What else does he have for me? How is he going to try and defend this? Then you say, okay, first you're going to be pushing through that hole. Second, you're going to be right on their heels, trying to get through to the objective. Then the last one is obviously do whatever you need to do in the objective, whether that's clear a building, rescue a hostage, destroy a truck, whatever. And the concept is that you plan the wrong way. You say, okay, what is my objective? What do I need to do there? I need to destroy a weapons cache. Okay, how can I do that? So what are the steps that I need to take from there to get to that point? So then you say, okay, well, I guess I can use first and second to push through a hole that we breach. Okay, then where is the enemy? How is he dispersed? What kind of weapons does he have? What can he do to me? And what has he put up in my path? Then you say, okay, now that I know where the enemy is, let me figure out how I'm going to blast through there. Then before that, you say, okay, what tools and what men am I going to use to blast through there? And then you say, okay, well then let's look at my whole group there. So the concept is you plan in the opposite way that you would execute. And this is a good kind of basis of how the things you should consider when you're planning to actually attack. Now, again, it's based on briefing. Or breaching. That's what this is for. And when I say breaching, I don't mean putting in a door. I mean getting through a minefield on a beach. It's from the Marine Corps manual for actually breaching. So getting through a prepared bunker and a minefield on the beach. But this actually applies both to the hasty or in-stride breach and the longer-term, larger-scale planned breach. They both kind of follow this form. But again, so many of your operations in urban terrain are going to be breaching. Let's get through this checkpoint. Let me find a way through there that this ends up being a good reference for it. Okay, so do I have any questions about this chart or the concept that I've tossed out? Anybody? Really? I'm just going to assume from your silence that nobody understood any of that.
There were lots of words in that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to go over. This was not supposed to be a huge part of the thing, so I went over it. I kind of blasted through it pretty quick. Okay, anyways, let's try and get through with this planning concept. So, when you are planning, I find that it is best you have to summarize what is going to happen here. And so you can take it back to your basic ass op-ord structure. And you're looking at your execution. So you want to go over your mission, obviously, to begin with. What do I need to do? Then you want to look at your execution. What do I want to do? How am I going to do it? Summarize these kind of things. I want to clear a large portion of a town east of an MSR. Okay, I want to clear 30 houses east of an MSR. Okay, that's what I want to do. That is the objective. How am I going to do that? Let's go through and then use your terrain analysis. So when you're doing this, so summarize what you want to do first, then go down to the map, go down to the OP, and look at your terrain. Where am I going? Where are the key points of terrain? Where are the areas that I want to go to? How am I going to get there? All of these, just keep pulling through your MOUTC. Keep looking at how can I get to what I want to get to. Identify key MSRs, ASRs, service routes. Identify strong buildings that can hold lots of men. Identify tall buildings that can provide important vantage points when you're pushing through. Designate them. Then say, how can I use this terrain? How can I use these key areas to push forward onto the objective and accomplish what I'm looking for? So that's a pretty key point there. You know, if anybody has Zoomwork, if you have anything for that, any sort of concepts around this. Making that plan the way that you're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, basically, as you just said, it follows the same planning process that you do for any type of operation, but with these particular focuses. Right?
Yeah.
Also, very important on urban terrain is, you know, to already at that stage think of what control measures can I use to synchronize and coordinate my urban operation, because an urban operation is very the intensity of command and control and communication that is needed is multiplied compared to a other than urban terrain operation, where already due to the density of terrain we operate in close proximity of each other, but by the terrain we're separated. So mutual support will only be over very small distances possible, typically, especially in the very high density urban areas like Fallujah, for example. So it's very important you already at that stage think of what control measures can I use to facilitate that, as in use MSRs as phase lines, whatever the fuck, and how you structure your communications. You really want to encourage your leaders already at that point of the briefing, then afterwards, to use crosstalk and encourage lateral communication so that you can further. That's not really the planning part.
Yeah. That kind of communication can be absolutely vital when you're dealing with, and one of the things to emphasize, land nav. A mistake of 100 yards in an open terrain or in a forest means, oh, they're a little bit farther over that way. A mistake of 100 yards in a city can put you isolated behind enemy lines, can put you out of visibility of the entire rest of the group. Making sure that people understand where they're going and when they're going there is very important when you're making a plan. That's exactly right, Zoomwork. So I have a couple of questions that I'd like people. These are kind of questions that you should ask when you're making a plan. when you're trying to understand the nature of the operation, the nature of this objective here, you want to say, why do we want it? Who will try to deny it to us? What do we have to accomplish it? What is the enemy going to use to stop us? Those questions are important to always ask yourself when you are planning this mission, when you are trying to understand how we are going to do this. Build a plan to deal with the most dangerous course of action, but do not rely on your plan completely. I see a lot of times on the server people who are nervous. They want to establish a long, complicated plan to accomplish the entire mission. It's not necessarily people who are in this channel right now, but you know, I'm sure you've met them. The entire mission will be planned out instead, and of course, you know, 5 minutes. No plan survives contact with the enemy. 5 minutes after you've started shooting, suddenly it's all gone to shit and you're trying to accomplish something that's not correct. So you'll, you know, always understand that, especially, I find at least, especially in urban terrain where so much can go wrong, where so much can run into walls, you have to be able to adapt. You have to, and again, this comes down to your terrain analysis. You have to know alternate positions if you can't get the enemy out, if you can't get into a place, if suddenly that place is now on fire. Sounds ridiculous, but believe it or not, it happens. That's the kind of thing that I'm talking about when you're doing your terrain analysis. Not just, okay, these are the points we need on there. That's why you plan for your operation. You plan for your operation by getting the objective and then getting every building of importance around it, then designing your route so that you can understand where that's going. Okay, I'm trying to see if I have anything else here for planning. Yeah, understanding the nature of the terrain when you're doing that. Zoom work, if you have anything else for planning. I realize that we're taking this a little bit short here, but I feel like there's a lot of things that we're touching on that were either covered in squad leading or platoon leading or other classes. This class is about MOUT and not about learning to plan an operation. And so understanding the difference that an urban environment will create in your plans, you are still planning in very much a similar way. So if Zoomork or anybody else here has some serious points to make about this kind of thing, or questions about planning. Seriously, no questions about planning? Jesus. All right, so moving on. Yeah, well, you know, you don't have to have questions. It's definitely... And this is complicated. We'll kill things. Yes, that's the questions that I would receive. When can we kill things? I want to shoot things. Go bang bang. So we're gonna move on to movement here, and this is more. This is more of a.
Think I have anything yet?
CQB. Yeah, we may not have it.
Sorry, could I just butt in for a second?
This is it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think you may have assailed people who were here for a fire team level course with all that high level stuff, but you can bring what Aqua was talking about down to fire team level. You know, I need to enter that compound. I'm going to breach using, you know, that fucking door there. There might be 2 or 3 guys and so on. So don't think at a platoon level you can bring this stuff way down to a level that you might feasibly be doing.
Yeah. So Jackson
I think
kind of
blasted
he
people with
explained
some-
it to me in the sense that CQB was going to be the smaller level, MOUT was going to be the higher level concept.
Yeah, that's how I understood it as well.
Yeah, which is why I kind of wrote this based on a squad and platoon leading level.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the course prereq and, you know...
Oh, I didn't even notice what it was. Unfortunately, this is what happens sometimes, especially now that the guy who was going to plan the course isn't here to actually take the course. It ends up being with, you know, his replacement's not teaching exactly what it was going to be. It'll be fine, though. We'll try and cover a lot more of the shooty bits when we do the FTX. And this is more shooty bits. I will cover a lot more movement during the FTX, but we'll give some basic bits here. Okay, so importance of arcs and covering. Obviously, when you're moving along in an area with a shitload of windows, with a million different ways that people can engage you, understanding your arc of fire, the arc of fire in the man behind you, and layering those arcs of fire so that they are complementary. So that the second man in your fire team line is going to be able to look over the shoulder if he needs to of the front man, but he's also covering that left side high to be able to make sure that you can move together. Moving as when I did Gothic Serpent, I was a squad leader there, and I went and I kind of taught my guys one of the methods to move quickly through an urban area that is severely compromised. That is, there are enemy everywhere, and that is every single time you have a significant break, be it between houses or between streets, the first two men peel off and set up security along that breach, that opening, while the second two men run past. So you just set up security, bound, move past, then the two men who are holding security there move to the other side. So you kind of just keep, and then suddenly the back two men in the fire team are now the first two men. And of course at that next breach, they then pull off, look to the whatever side that the hole between cover is, and use that. Quick movement through there, that kind of in stride, bounding sort of format where you're just keep your head about you. There's a tremendous amount that you can do as a soldier by just thinking, okay, how do I fight in close areas? How do I move between buildings with my head up, trying to find it? So that kind of covering as you move along, importance of arcs of fire, especially when you're holding a strong point. If you're in a strong point, if you're holding a building against enemy forces, make sure that you've dispersed your men or moved yourself to a place that is a complementary but separate arc of fire. That is, you are in a window next to a buddy and you are firing at a different area, but if you need to, you can switch over if a shitload of enemies come through his sector. Covering your sector is vital when an enemy soldier holding a grenade can dash out in half a second into the main street and throw it towards your position. When you're in an urban area, covering your sector is more important than in an open area where you might be able to see where an enemy would come from. So moving in urban terrain sucks, by the way. If any of you want to have a fun little experiment, the next time you're walking in a town, walk to school, walk to the store, walk anywhere. Just make a note of every gap in the ground, in the air, in a building near you where someone could shoot at you. You'll last about a block. There are too many. It is very difficult to move at a fire team level in a modern city because of how much there is out there that can really get you. So find covering this kind of thing. This is more of your CQB, obviously. Cover the angles. Slice that pie when you get to corners. Get some other stuff. Okay. Communication, moving on. Communication, obviously vital. Communication between forces, again, as we had said before, even more important in urban areas where you can very easily have blue-on-blue contact by shooting down a street, strong pointing buildings. When you have people who do not have sight lines on each other, it becomes hard for squads and even fire teams to maintain knowledge of where people are. I'm sure they covered it a lot in CQB, calling out when you get to places. I do it all the time. I rarely hear other people doing it. Friendly coming in. Friendly coming behind. When you're moving to other areas, when you're moving into buildings, when you're moving just around a corner, friendly's coming out. Shit like that saves lives, and it makes you a hell of a lot less frustrated. It may not punish the idiot who would have shot you before, but now you're not even shot because you've told that idiot what happened. So that kind of communication on a low level, communication on a fire team to squad leader level, understanding where you're going, how you're getting there, and communication on a higher level between squads, between platoons, to understand where they are and what they're trying to do. Is one squad strong pointing while the other one leads forward? Make sure you know exactly where that advance is taking place so that you don't engage them by accident, so that your grenades don't go over too far and destroy friendlies, that kind of stuff. Okay, leadership is going to be held out a lot with the FTX, but there are a lot of issues that you're looking at here. Leadership in MOUT is very difficult, and I'm going to try and keep this at mainly the squad leader level, and maybe a little bit in the fire team level. You've got some of the initial concepts are micro versus macro management, and that means specifically, are you setting sectors for each of your men to fire on, or are you saying just hold that building? And that, obviously, depending on your position, if you're a fire team lead, you need to keep that micro lead. You need to be able to tell me where all of the concrete walls are when you're assaulting down one street. Which building's enterable, which building's not. That's micromanagement. That's fire team level leading. Understanding where to get into in a very small area and how to, where your men are looking at any given time. Micro leading. Macro leading at your squad or platoon level. Take this street and hold it. Understanding how to move them in complementary settings. This is, I'm realizing now, because I did this in squad leading the other day, how much I'm trying to cover in a very short amount of time and how complicated this can get. But your macro, understanding how to position people so that they are mutually supportive, and this is a very difficult concept to deal with in MOUT, but again, it falls back to your terrain analysis. Can I put them in 2 strong point buildings that will allow both of them to help each other out if they need to? Can we put them in such a way that there's a back route so they can transfer ammo or medical supplies or whatever they may need between each other? That kind of stuff is macro level leadership. Now, obviously, setting the whole plan is going to be part of that too, but just being able to move your fire teams and your squads around to support each other without necessarily telling them, get in the building on the right door. But that, the micro leadership, I know a lot of you are kind of here to deal with that, is that knowing which door is the best door to get through. Does that store have glass in it that we can be shot through? Is there a roof that we can get on so that we can shoot down from there? Micro leadership, understanding the micro terrain. One of the biggest challenges for leading in MOUT is the speed at which decisions need to be made. As my example before, some enemy jumping out in a half of a second with a grenade in his hand. The speed at which decisions need to be made. Now that happens to be a very micro level thing at a fire team. Do we try and jump for the grenade? Do we run back? Do I have all my men set up so they can shoot him? What if he misses that shot? Do we run away from the house? Do we just everybody get down on their belly and try to ride out any sort of explosion? All of that is quick thinking, fast leadership, and it happens again. I think a lot of people get tricked in the speed. They think, oh, I'll be all ready for it. And I've seen this a dozen times on the primary. I'll be able to do it. I'll be able to jump forward and hit the right place. I will be able to move my men around fast enough. When in fact, they get up to that line and they assume that, okay, well, while we're engaged, I'm going to have enough time. I'm going to have 3 minutes to move my guys around a little bit. I'm going to be able to send them long radio messages about how things are happening, where things are going. While, like you might when you're making a larger assault on a village and you're just in the middle of nowhere or you're on a hill, you don't have that time. And you have to make a decision. Making a bad decision is better than making no decision. Making no decision allows the enemy to flank you, allows the enemy to destroy you. I know that actually doesn't apply in co-ops because a lot of times the AI won't actually punish you for making... It will punish you for making a bad decision, and it won't punish you for making no decision. But in TVTs, making no decision will kill you. Especially, yeah?
That's not true, because I did see I was in a mission where the whole thing, our entire force got surrounded by BMP-1s because we didn't move fast enough.
So co-op, that was a co-op you're saying?
Yes.
That in a co-op indecision will kill you as well. Well, generally, that's pretty much a rule of real-life warfare. I'm trying to tailor this more to Arma. But yes, if you can make a decision, a bad decision is better than no decision. Because you will get surrounded, you will get suppressed, you will lose the initiative, and then suddenly you're fucking screwed, and you didn't even see.
Put it in other words, if you don't decide, the enemy will decide, and obviously you don't want to have
Exactly.
the enemy being able to.
So that kind of make that decision quickly, and I see, okay, well, I can just move them up there. No. When you issue your briefing to your men, you need to have concrete things to get to. Okay, squad leaders on me. Okay, fire team leaders on me. We need to move forward to this house. You need to make sure that they understand that it is now your subordinate leader's responsibility to find the right house to strong point. You might have a couple of things in your overall plan that says, okay, well, I'm going to go here, and I'm going to suppress this avenue. You need to make sure that they understand, okay, well, you're going to go to this house, you're going to go through this room, and you're going to look down here to allow the rest to go there. You need to make sure that you take as much of that decision making, that clouding the net with comms, off your plate while you're in there. So as soon as you can, do so. So anyways, that's the whole concept. Those decisions build up fast, and you're going to need to be able to deal with them. I can't really teach you to go quick decision making here, but I can tell you that it is absolutely vital. So try, when you're out there, understand how fast you really need to make those decisions. You really need to make those calls, and try and put yourself, by developing an overall plan, in a position where you have to make the least number of quick decisions possible, because they will build up, and then at some point there will be an overwhelming bit. And in fact, as a commander, and the Tiger team may try to do this, you can try and defeat enemy commanders by giving them too many things to decide on at one point. So if there are absolutely too many things that people need to decide on, that you can just block up all of it. And they will give them 6 diversions, 4 civvies running into their lines. If you can create enough of those kind of distractions, everything around there, you can defeat an enemy who is drowning in the number of decisions that he has to make. So, let me just look at the outline here. ROEs. That's not much in Arma. It's very important in the real world, but understand who you should shoot, when you should shoot. There are some missions that have, you can't shoot civilians. It is constantly broken in Arma. Everybody ignores it. I would really try, in the sense of realism, to try, because if you ignored that in the real world, you are tried and generally sent to the brig for manslaughter. It is a huge, serious thing. And so I'd like to try and implement that kind of stuff when you're there. Try and make sure that they don't shoot who they shouldn't shoot. Generally, that gives you a tactical advantage, because now you're not wasting ammo. Now you don't have 6 dead bodies. A lot of times in those TVTs or co-TVTs, when you're not supposed to engage civilians, you're giving away your position by shooting civilians when you should be shooting the enemy. ROEs are important to maintain and important to bash into your subordinate leaders' heads and your men's heads while you're doing it. Okay, ace checks and combat checks, obviously very important. Understanding the situation as you're moving forward, it's important in regular games. It's especially important here. Understanding, okay, does he have, the difference between 2 belts of 240 ammo and 4 belts of 240 ammo is enormous. One is dangerously low. You have to go refill him. One is, okay, well, we have enough for a while. We may be able to hold this point low. Do your checks, because if you get large numbers of enemy closing in on your position, or you have to suppress for a while, suddenly you've run through 200 rounds in 3 minutes. You shouldn't, but sometimes gunners do that. And now you need to know how well that kind of thing is going. A couple more points on leadership. Trust your subordinate leaders. It's hard on the primary. There are a lot of times when you have shitty leaders, or people who don't really understand that. But if you are a squad leader, you can get caught up in trying to find the right house and the right way to breach, and you will allow the enemy to flank you. If you are a platoon leader, if you are deciding which street to go on, which building to strong point, you will allow the enemy to flank you or destroy you. Try to focus on your macro skills, on your macro management, and let your subordinate leaders handle the micro terrain. A lot of times they're able to see, okay, well, that bus shelter over there has an enemy in it, when you can't from your position. So trust them to do what they deal with. All right. Let me go over anything that I have left here. Strong pointing is absolutely vital in these kind of cities, as I've gone over it a million times. But putting your men there, holding, because you can put one squad of people inside, one squad of soldiers inside a good building, and they can lock down an entire avenue as long as they have enough ammo. That allows you to move the entire rest of your platoon to attack an enemy on a different way. Strong pointing can really, really help because there is less terrain to maneuver on. Overwatch is very important, but you need to understand the difference between a building that is going to be that has great sight lines but is vulnerable, and a building that has good sight lines but is strong enough that you can actually fire from. Sometimes it's smarter to use a building that has a lot of seeing to hide your men and use it as a recon position rather than an overwatch position. Cover, 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 cover. Get behind it. I have seen a number of times this happen on the primary where combat leaders, squad, and even fire team level leaders are putting their men like 10 meters, 20 meters outside of a city behind a little wall or a tree or something like that, when there are these big, safe buildings to sit next to where you can watch your flanks. They just want to have either A, more of their guns able to shoot into the town, or they want to kind of be able to see things. And it's ridiculous because anybody in that building who has a 40 mil is just going to start lobbing it over buildings. It's very easy if you are not sitting next to the building's wall to defend against that kind of thing. When you are getting into a city, a town, any sort of built up area, go to cover and establish strong points. That is huge. Okay, I think we'll allow, Zoomorg, any sort of thoughts, any sort of things here, and then we'll try to open it up for any sort of questions.
No, I think I would directly go over to the questions part here, and then we'll take it
questions.
into the game.
All right, so questions about any part of MOUT? Nothing? So I assume you all learned everything that I said here, and you will be completely the greatest MOUT commanders ever.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Pretty well.
Yeah, sure. Let's go with that.
All right. All right.
Honestly, there's too much for us to learn all at once.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. All of these courses, there's way too much to be taught. MOUT is a very, very difficult, in-depth task. Okay, well, I'm going to take a couple-minute break here, maybe 4 minutes, take a piss, get a drink, have a smoke, and then we'll get back and start the FTX.